What act of dissent or deviation has had an impact on you? Can you think of one that stands out?
Yeah, it's one that I've looked into recently actually, and I knew about it, but it's just come back into my life constantly through the shaping of a project. It's the Salt March, Salt March that Gandhi did in 1930, which is just an incredible act of courage, where he started to walk through India and invite people to follow him, and he was going to the seafront to extract the salt despite the limitations of the government in extracting salt, and which was at the time very highly taxed, and so Indian people themselves could not afford to do it, and it was totally controlling the control of Indian people by British people, and by doing so, and I think that's what made the most impact on me. Is he did this, he extracted the salt with some of his friends, and this was considered as a very controversial act at the time, and but did not have a direct impact immediately. He was jailed, he was put away for 6 months or so, something, and in the meantime a British government just went back onto their law and just tried to ignore it. However, this march slowly led towards the independence of India, but it wasn't the march itself on the day that went and then India rised and declared independence. It was just a slow process, and I really believe all these acts of dissent can be small act of dissent, but it's one after the other, and it's all the knock-on effect and makes the thing tick. To me, that's what dissent is. That's how I'd like to explore the theme, which leads to what I wanted to do in terms of the collaboration we're going to have in the shop, possibly, and try to see what it is that as a knock-on effect, every relationship, every moment that people do, people meet, people talk, every conversation can change something.
Yeah.
So that's how I see Dissent now, anyway.
Isn't it? Like, this is like another. I didn't even know this word existed until I did know it kind of existed, but I didn't realise it could be a. It's kind of like too perfect, this word, for like what I do, for what my practice is, like undermining ideas and undermining thoughts, undermining people. So I haven't really it's like one of those things that's almost too good to be true. So I need to work out how to go about it without it being too obvious.
I suppose because of my background, where in faith terms I still kind of cling on to the edges of Christianity, although I find it very problematic. But I find that my work has kind of echoes in the past through the dissenters, people like the Diggers, who took a radical stance about the ownership of land, and I see a lot to admire in the things that they did, and that they came from kind of a long line of British dissenters, and that's continued, I think, that kind of romantic, mystical Englishness, which I kind of feel that I'm a part of.
Yeah.
So, yes. not quite the William Blake of the 21st century, but he's quite a hero.
When that's related to art and sculpture, was when in my early teens I changed school. I went to college, Camille. So that's when I discovered when you got into that school, you got an introduction about Camille Claudel, the school was named after. Who was a French sculptor, and she was Rodin's muse and lover. And it was not appropriate for women at the time to be sculptors, to be honest. It was a man's art. And so she really struggled with that. Some people say she was crazy. And she did it, she ended up in a mental asylum and died there. But she was so driven and so talented. To take her away from that, I think really destroyed her. But I really admire her. I was like, never mind the madness. Her work is just amazing, and she did that. At a time where it was really not, a good thing. It was dangerous for everyone to find you. And France, probably backwards with that as well.
Yeah.
So
the
that
law
changed
was
something for me.
Yeah.
Because then I was like, women can be sculptors.
So you, before that, you too thought women could be sculptors?
No, I just became a man's thing. I wanted to. I was always making stuff. And even when we went on holiday somewhere, I found some, we were walking in the countryside and I found some red dirt. Brilliant. I went back home with a bag, to get a bag, and went back there and I got some of that red stuff. Went back home, mixed it with water and started making it. I made something like a Viking boat or something. But yeah, I had to make it. I always had to make something.
I can think of two acts of deviation or dissent that has had an impact on me. The first one, I don't know if this is interesting or not, is that when I was about 6 or 7, my mum had a friend who used to come visit, and all day every day, and whenever she visited us, she'd always wear one stud earring and one long earring, and they were always very decorative, but they were always odd, like wearing odd socks. And as a 6-year-old, I appreciated their beauty, like, oh wow, they're so glittery and interesting. But I also understood that she was breaking a cultural norm, that she was making a statement. I didn't even go as far, it wasn't even important if she was actually saying something in particular. It was just, oh, that's different, and I love it.
There's a friend of mine, a girl called Louisa, who goes binning. She takes waste food from supermarkets and distributes it to those who need it. And her life quite inspires me. Her life and practice are one, completely intertwined. I think people who do things like that, where they see something wrong, and rather than just complaining about it, actually go and do something about it that benefits others, even though it puts them at risk. She knows she could get arrested, and yeah, I find that really challenging. to how I live my life. I think she's so committed in what she believes in, and it would be quite convenient at times for her to just forego those principles. She has to go to extraordinary lengths to live by them, and she puts herself at risk. And so I think I find that really challenging, because I can sit here and talk about all these things, about living and thinking differently, but I'm just as caught up in the convenience of living in a consumerist society as the next person.
Can I be selfish with this answer? Okay, fine. Selfishly, me, like, I guess I wouldn't be where I am now if, like, I carried on going through. When I got to sixth form and everyone was filling in UCAS and I'm going to apply to this uni, I'm going to study this, and I was like, well, I don't know what I want to do. I'll bank on 2 options, but I'll have a year filler doing. No, it was either art, English. Where do I go? And I did my foundation year, despite kind of being indirectly told at school, like, you need to fill out your UCAS, you need to do this, and this needs to be done by this date. Whereas I kind of politely declined and said, no, I'm applying for this, which was my foundation year, which was done by form, so not through UCAS. So that, and being one, I think maybe the only one.
So you're the only person who didn't actually go through the process they were trying to.
Yeah, maybe 2 of us in my year who decided not to follow the routine, I think.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely wouldn't have been in Winchester. I wouldn't have met you guys.
When I was in hospital, we spoke a bit about a short while ago, and because I was on my ass for 3 months, my mate thought it'd be a good idea to get this big ass book on philosophical ideas, and which probably damaged me in all kinds of ways. It was a slippery slope to get on, but it was reading about Kant, and there's this Copernican moment when with this one step he destroyed the last 2,000 years of Western thinking and reversed it all. And I think that for me just changed everything. The way I thought about things, the way I approached things. It inspired me. It's the idea that no matter how compelling things might look to you, they're not necessarily that way. And it's this understanding that what we see as knowledge is just a moment in time. It's what we have at this current moment, our best of our abilities. But it's a passing thing. It's impermanent. It'll change. Knowledge grows. Knowledge falls apart. So this idea of change, of fluctuation, the sense of temporality, and the value of questioning and not accepting. This one chapter in this book just coalesced everything into that, and I think it's almost of discovery. It kind of gave if like an academic purpose or view or framework for this intuitive rebellion that I've been feeling all these years. And I just remember reading it and my head was tingling as it went off there. I was really struggling. I thought, hold on, you spend a day on a page, that type of thing, but when you get through it and you can feel it all, and it's informed everything that I do since then. The shift, not just the actual information contained in this viewpoint, but also the signification and the act of doing this, of this pursuit of questioning and taking it where it will go, and having the courage to turn things over. I think that's. I give talks in schools and kids and stuff, and very often have a last slide, which is just never stop asking questions. I try and beat that into them. And that's so important. And I think that's very much a gift I feel I've been given. So that was, I suppose that's my most dissentful thing is, when you destroy the known universe, that's quite a that's quite a dissentful thing, isn't it?
First thing that pops into my head is my auntie. She is my inspiration. She is everything. Like, I look up to her, even though she's not with us anymore. Like, she is just, I just think of her as just amazing, and I just wish the world knew about her because I think she's amazing. I know there are lots of people that are amazing, but personally, she had cystic fibrosis, as did two of her sisters, who passed away before she did, and one of them had 2 kids, but the little girl, Isabel, she had cerebral palsy when she was born, and sadly her mum passed away through giving birth to her. And so my auntie became kind of like a mum to her, in the sense of, well, Isabel always calls her sister, but like she helped bring her up, as did my aunt's mum. And when Isabel was born, they were told, she's got cerebral palsy, she's never going to walk, talking is going to be a massive issue. My aunt was like, I'm not having any of this. I'm not listening to you, don't believe you, just let me get on with this. I will deal with this. And they kept saying to her, no, she's not going to walk, she's not going to walk. Isabel walks. She does because of my auntie, and that is the reason, because she believed in her, because she helped her, because she persevered. She walks, she doesn't have crutches, anything. She walks by herself. And I believe 100% that's because of my auntie. And she was like that in her life about everything, like you can't tell her no, because she would just be like, no, I'll do this, I'll get through this. I don't know how old she was, but she was quite old for having cystic fibrosis. I think she was in her 40s, which is quite a long time. And it's because of this passion inside her. She was amazing.
When I was at college, my history teacher and my English teacher was the same teacher.
Okay.
And we did media studies. And so we were learning to analyse and interpret texts, but texts could mean an advert or a film. And so I remember learning to read adverts. And I vaguely remember the feeling of like the claws being like extracted and just not really getting sucked in ever again. And then I went on, before I came over, I did some papers in visual culture at university, so learning about semiotics and sign reading and things. So that really sort of deepened my education with regard to being able to read anything in the world and interpret it and understand cultural norms and cultural systems of communicating as quite as not absolute. And I think if there's one thing that I want business owners to understand, actually, is that not only do they have the power to create, and they are creating something through their business that's intending to have some sort of impact in the world, they actually have the option, the choice of what sort of culture they create inside their community. And you know, you can, and even just generally in life, there's this big ingrained system of culture and media and traditional ways that information is streamed to us. But if you take that learning, that critical thinking, that questioning, what are they trying to say? What are the meanings that I'm just like picking up because it's implied, it's association, it's connotation, it's not literal. Where does that come from? And actually understanding the influence of culture, and then if you step back from that, then you can actually say, well, how could we do it differently?
Yeah.
And you can make your own.
I think again the autism and the way we sort of live on the outside of the normal world, and I think we just feel as though we don't belong, and but we're comfortable and happy with not belonging, so I suppose that makes us dissenters, doesn't it?
Give me an everyday example of how that shows up.
Just going out, I think, with my son is really, really difficult because you have to be quite thick-skinned, because wherever we go, we create. We have an audience basically, and it's embarrassing. I'm not embarrassed of him, but I'm embarrassed because everyone's staring at us. And for instance, going to Tesco's during the school holidays, I really, really find that sometimes we just have to go to Tesco's. I have to take my son there. I find it really, really difficult. He's quite happy, but I find it really difficult because everyone stares, and it's just hard physically. It's hard because he'll drop to the floor, he'll roll about on the floor, so I can't really sort of leave him, so I have to pick him up. And it's a struggle, and everyone's watching you struggle. And so, but sometimes you just need supplies, so I have to go, and we sort of have to grin and bear it, and we sort of go in. I go with my head down, think, right, I've got to do this. I go in as quickly as I can, and then back home again. So we sort of, it's a bit dramatic, but it's a bit like a prison. But it's a prison being created as sort of safe haven, I suppose. Is that a good example?
How has it changed your view of the world?
I can be a little defensive, I think. I think that's natural. I have to try and sort of realise that other people can't help the way they see us, so I become a little bit defensive. But and I think it's completely changed the way I am. I think I'm much less narrow-minded, and I see that other people are still the way I used to be, quite sort of shallow and but that's fine. I think because I've got my art, I can sort of work through that, and the aim is to sort of just shed a little light for, people. If I can just get one person to think, gosh, that's really different. I can't imagine living like that, and I feel like I've sort of succeeded.
I think what impressed me, I put it on Facebook, was this a group of soldiers, Israeli soldiers, and it was before the summer, before the last war, and they were in the occupied territories in one of the towns there, that they need to patrol a neighborhood, just go up and down. So you might have seen it because I put it on the Hampshire contact improvisation page, but you see a clip of them walking, and maybe 6 soldiers in 2 rows. And then somebody put very famous, I can't remember her name, but she's a really pop singer of this generation. And they started to do a rap or a dance, a street dance, beautifully, for a few minutes. They finish, and they resume their up and down walking. And that inspires me and impressed me. And,
What was the significance of it for you? Can you explain it to me?
Yeah, I mean, it is to, just again slightly shifting from the norm. Okay, so in Israel, the norm is you are 18, you go to the army, you have to do what the officers tell you to do. So all of a sudden you actually play the game differently. And using dance as a form to protest, to sublimate, dance to sublimate, because all of the, I want to say all of the arts are sublimation, but it's not true, because art is a bigger thing, a lot bigger than sublimation. But to see soldiers, and for us, everything that we think about soldiers, to see them actually dance, and all of a sudden it's in your face. My goodness, these people are 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, and this is what they have to do.
They're more than soldiers.
And they are more than soldiers, and this gives hope. That they do it, they risk, they put them in jail after that, and they risk because they put their guns down, or I don't know, maybe they dance, I can't remember if they dance with the guns or not, but they show the absurdity that they are in, that all of a sudden, threatening other people's, intervening in other people's life, and all the tragedy and absurdity of this situation. So it's a beautiful protest. Yes, I loved it. It's very modest and it's very brave.
Mark Wallinger is someone who really inspires me. He did a work called State Britain. There was this guy whose name I can't remember. He set up this protest against the Iraq War in Parliament Square. And there were loads of banners and placards that he'd made there while he was based in that location. And whilst he was based there, there was a law that was passed prohibiting protests taking place within a kilometre square kind of area of Parliament Square unless you had permission. It was kind of implied that this was brought in specifically to get rid of this guy who'd become a bit of a nuisance. So the law was passed. He didn't have permission to protest there, so he was cleared away. And at the same time, Mark Wallinger was invited to do a piece of work in Tate Britain, in the Devine galleries. And so Mark Wallinger had been at this site a few days before this guy was evicted, and he'd taken loads of pictures of it. So for his work in the Tate Britain, he recreated every part of that protest in exact detail. He paid sign painters to remake all the signs from photographs that he'd taken, and he installed it in the gallery because the gallery actually, the exclusion zone for this protest area ran through the gallery. So he marked this line, this exclusion zone, in the gallery, and positioned this work kind of over this line. And it was very clever because it wasn't the actual protest. It was a reproduction of it. It was appropriation. But it was clever because it was drawing attention to the issue, but in a way that probably got more attention for the cause than the protest originally did. I think he might have actually won the Turner Prize for it, and invited the guy whose protest it was to attend the ceremony with him. And he accepted the prize. But yeah, I really like Mark Wallinger because he takes on these very loaded situations and is very playful with them. He's not afraid to work with them.
think that there's a guy, he's dead now, but a guy called Utah Phillips he was a hobo and an anarchist, and he was a storyteller, and he essentially kind of realised very young on, which is kind of the start of the 1900s, that the history he learnt in school wasn't kind of a history that he could relate to. It was somebody else's history. And so he basically spent his whole life travelling on railways and speaking to people, going to political rallies, and then passing on these stories. He never wrote them down. He would just go to places and he would say them. And he's got an archive of recordings, and there's something about 3,000 stories, but they're all up here in his head. And sometimes he sings them, sometimes he just sort of says them, and some of them are they're like Raymond Carter stories, they're sort of 3 sentences, whereas others are kind of very in-depth stories. He talks about the long memory and about storytelling, and the idea that these stories are passed because they'll never be accepted by the kind of norm, so it's up to people to pass them along, kind of the people who are interested in them. I think it was as much about his character. I admired his character.
It was when I was officially called a dissenter by the judge in the jury case that I was on, where I disagree. I didn't actually disagree with the verdict, but we were asked to. I was on a jury with a murder case, and although the guy was found guilty, when we initially went into the room, there were 2 counts. It was rape and murder, and on the rape, we couldn't get. Nobody could say there was enough evidence to say that he'd done that. So we all agreed that we couldn't say. We didn't have enough evidence to say whether he'd raped her. And then 7 said yes, he'd murdered her, and 5 said there wasn't enough evidence. And by the time we left the room, there was 11 who said there was, and 1 who said there wasn't enough evidence, and I was the 1. And so when they read the thing out in court, they used that phrase. So the foreman announced the thing, and then, I don't know the name of the legal person, said to the judge, so to recap, there's 11 guilty and 1 dissenter. So it was using that word dissenter as someone who didn't agree, I suppose. But the whole thing put so much pressure on me in my mind, because although I agreed that on balance I was pretty certain he'd done it, as they did, like the 7-5 that we had originally, like those other 4 people, if you'd asked me to say the evidence proved it, I couldn't say that. I could say I thought he did it, 99% sure, but I couldn't say the evidence showed it. So then I was going home and looking up reasonable doubt. What is reasonable doubt? So for me, the whole thing was actually quite traumatic, because all the evidence was very traumatic. The way he murdered her was nasty, and it was nasty, but it was particularly sexually perverted, and it was horrible. It was a horrible case, and it was about 2 months we were on it, and the outcome of that was I was labelled a dissenter. So whenever this word dissenter comes up, I find it really difficult to get beyond that experience, I suppose.
So to sum up, when that word was used in court, what was the impact on you? What did it mean?
Actually,
what was the
I
challenge?
think it's that's a really good question, and I think it ties in with this idea of dissent being a good thing or a bad thing, but regardless of which it is, normally it's quite a lonely thing, or it's a smaller, it's a not conforming thing. And so the impact at the time when he said it, I felt very alone. I felt very confused if I'd done the right thing, because I now wasn't part of the pack.
for better or worse, I was a sort of protagonist in that room, because right up to the end of it I was saying, well, what about this and what about that? And I think the basic point is that that is good. Society needs those. It's not always nice to be that person, but we need people like that in society. And so, like artists at CAS, we need people who say, well, actually, I don't see it that way. For right or for wrong, I think we should discuss this the way